Episode of Throwing It Back with Sean Farrell. I am Sean Farrell. God is great all the time. All the time, God is great. And let's not waste no time. Let's get right to it. So, one of the worst teams in the league were the 1997-98 Denver Nuggets during that year. Tied for the third worst record of all time. And the worst record of all time now belongs to the Charlotte Bobcats, who in the lockout season of 2012, I believe, they went 7-57. So that honor belongs to the Charlotte Bobcats. That's the worst franchise record in league history. Okay, so the Denver Nuggets went 11-71 in 1998, okay? And a few of their players spoke on the subject. Johnny Newman, who was on that team, said when he was recognized as a Nuggets player, the jokes would start. They would crack jokes like, hey, just ordinary citizens, the everyday man, everyday woman would crack jokes by saying, hey, can we come play for you all? In other words, the Nuggets were so bad that even the everyday man could play basketball for the Denver Nuggets. Johnny Newman said he had no social life, but he had to venture out. He said the worst place to go was the barbershop because you didn't want to get your haircut. But you had to listen to it while you were sitting in the barber chair. Okay. And so he was the second leading scorer behind Eric Williams, who I'll get to in a second. Newman averaged nearly 15 points a game for the Nuggets in 1998. At one point, they were 5-58. Dennis Rodman, who played for the Bulls, who was still with the Bulls in 1998, called them the worst team in the history of basketball. The Nuggets were fodder for David Letterman and Jay Leno. There was a joke that went around that said a fear of an asteroid would destroy Earth. If the Nuggets jersey was on the asteroid couldn't help but miss. Okay. So those are just some of the jokes that were going around about the Denver Nuggets. They did pick up Corey Alexander late in the season. They did go 6-13 towards the end of the season. I'll get hit to that in a second. Alexander did get a 6-year, $14 million deal as a result, but they bought him out after only 2 years. Okay. So Steve Hess, the strength and conditioning coach for the Nuggets back then, said, I hope the sun is shining because it's pretty dark in here. Danny Fortson was a first round draft pick. Joe Wolf had a previous stint with the Denver Nuggets back in 1991 and 92. Brian Stith was still there. LaFonso Ellis. Those were some good friends with Steve Hess, the strength and conditioning coach. They went through a tough time, but it made them stronger. That's what they all said. Bobby Jackson, who was a first-round draft pick, he said, throw a bunch of rookies in the fire and you're going to get cooked. Danny Fortson and Eric Washington were also drafted in 1997. Alan Bristow, the vice president of basketball operations, he was a Hornets and Nuggets assistant. Well, he used to be assistant coach for the Denver Nuggets. He also used to coach the Hornets. And his job was to clear up salary cap space after the 98 season. And so Allie Bristol came in midway through the 96-97 campaign. And after the 97 campaign was done, Dale Ellis was gone, Mark Jackson was gone, Tom Hammonds was gone, Irvin Johnson, Ricky Pierce, Antonio McDyess was traded on the eve of training camp for the 98 season to the Phoenix Suns for 3 number ones and 2 second-round draft picks. Okay. So Johnny Newman said guys were taking physicals, still had new guys coming in. There was no time to jail. They also had a bunch of first-round picks who had first-round egos. Bobby Jackson, Danny Fortson, Eric Washington. No. Scratch that. It was Tony Battie, who was drafted 5th by Denver. Danny Fortson was drafted 10th. And Bobby Jackson was drafted 23rd overall. So they had a first-year coach, Bill Hanslick, did the Nuggets. They say Bill Hanslick was over his head. He was a former player for the Denver Nuggets. He was Bill Hanslick. He got fired after a year. So the trouble started in the 4th game of the season when Eric Williams, who was leading the Nuggets in scoring at nearly 20 points per game, he tore his ACL the 4th game of the year. So that was pretty much it for Eric Williams in the 98 campaign. LaFonso Ellis was injured. Bryant Stith was injured for half the year. The Nuggets started 0-12 and eventually were 2-38 when they had a January 24th game versus the Clippers. They won that game 99-81. And they were with the 96 Grizzlies and the Cavs of the early 80s for worst starts by a franchise. Okay. And so at one point they were 4-41. Allie Bristol was fired, replaced by none other than former Nuggets player and former Nuggets coach Dan Issel. McDyess, who was in Phoenix, he was watching the disaster from afar. And Antonio McDyess was quoted as saying, "Thank you for not letting me be here to experience that." Okay. And so at one point they were 5-58, and they were on pace to finish 7-75. Okay. And Johnny Newman and some of the other veterans, they recalled, they talked about it, and they said, "We don't want to be a part of that record. We talked over it. We slept over it. We had dinner over it." So they were absolutely obsessed with not being the worst team in the history of the NBA up until that point in 1998. Okay. Steve Hess, the strength and conditioning coach, said if they Steve Hess was trying to motivate the players in any way they could. So they made a bet. So Hess made a bet with the players that if they won, he would run 17 times from width to width on the court in less than 60 seconds. Okay. The Nuggets won, and Hess did it, and the players got a kick out of it. Corey Alexander, who they picked up late in the season, he asked for his release from the San Antonio Spurs. And he was picked up on March 4th. So he was averaging 14 points per game in 23 games. The Nuggets eventually got to 9-63, 9-67. And then they had an April 9th game against the Sacramento Kings in which they won 128-103. And so they won a few more games to finish 11-71. I just mentioned that they went 6-13 down the stretch. Okay. And so Joe Wolf was quoted as saying, "We never gave up." I mentioned that they started 0-12 before they beat the Timberwolves, playoff bound Timberwolves, 95-84. I believe they lost. Then they lost 23 straight. Okay. And one of those losses was a 111-72 loss at home to the Chicago Bulls, in which Rodman said they're the worst team in NBA history. Michael Jordan didn't have to do much. He only had 15 points. Scottie Pippen had 19. Scott Burrell was a high man with 24 points. And Rodman himself had 16 rebounds. Okay. So then they pick up a 192 win versus the Clippers. Okay. And so they go on to lose six. They go on a second long losing streak, 16 games. One of those games was a 118-90 loss to the Bulls in Chicago. Jordan had 30. Pippen had 24. Rodman had 17 rebounds. And the Bulls had 6 players in double figures. Just like they had 6 players in double figures in the blowout loss in Denver. And so it was late in the year. They actually got back-to-back wins against Vancouver and Portland. Playoff-bound Portland, who they defeated twice towards the end of the regular season. And I can remember on Sunday morning, my oldest brother was reading the sports page. And he said, and he looked at the NBA scores. And he said, Denver won again. So then I'm like, who did they beat? He said, Portland. Go figure. They defeated Portland twice late in the season. Playoff bound Portland. I'm pretty sure I'll read about that in the Jailblazers book. Overall, they were 9-33 at home, and they were 2-40 on the road. Okay. Oh, no. Scratch that. 2-40 would be 42 home games. They were 1-40 away, and they were 10-32 at home, if my math is correct. My math is off, okay. But the 98 roster consisted of the lone 2 players remaining from the 94 team that upset the Denver Nuggets and that upset the Seattle Supersonics in the playoffs. They still had LaFonso Ellis and Bryant Stith, okay? But overall, the roster was Harold Ellis, Dean Garrett. They had a guy named Kawane Lee Morris Garris. Kawane Lee Morris Garris was his name. Okay. And so Anthony Goldwire, Bobby Jackson, Danny Fortson, Tony Battie, Corey Alexander, Priest Lauderdale, Johnny Newman, Bryant Stith, Eric Washington, Eric Williams, Joe Wolf, and George Zidek. Okay. So you're not going to win very many games with a roster like that. Okay. And I also looked at scratch that. The Charlotte Bobcats are not the worst team in NBA history. The 70-57 Charlotte Bobcats are really not the worst team in NBA history, okay? You got to go all the way back to 1947-48, okay? There was an NBA team called the Providence Steamrollers, okay? Let me say that again. There was a NBA team called the Providence Steamrollers, okay? And they finished 6-42 in 1947-48, okay? And they had a guy on that team by the name of Nat Hickey. Okay? Guy by the name of Nat Hickey. Not only did he play for the Providence Steamrollers, he was also a coach. So, and he was also the oldest player to play an NBA game. In 1948, Nat Hickey was 45 years old. So he played in an NBA game at 45 years old. Okay, so just a little bit of historical context right there. All right, that's it, and that's all for Throwing It Back with Sean Farrell. God bless you all. Peace. See y'all on the next one. I'm gone.